Like Dana said, I'm the commander for Campbell County Constitutional Militia, which is just south of Lynchburg. We're adjacent to Lynchburg on the south side. How many Trump fans do we have in the room? How many people voted for Trump? A whole bunch, huh? Everybody, pretty much. You know, I've never seen the kind of political energy that Trump generated, particularly in his bid for re-election 2020. Is anybody, especially older people, Ronald Reagan, did he have the same kind of political energy? As much? Not as much? Close? Close, but not as much. That's pretty much what I hear every time I talk about this. So, I have never seen that kind of political energy in America, certainly not in my lifetime. It's been a long time since the world saw that kind of political energy for a candidate. Why did Trump generate so much energy? What was so different or so special about Donald Trump that got people so excited and so wound up?
He said what we want to say.
Okay, he acted as a mouthpiece for the people. He wasn't part of the establishment. He wasn't a Democrat. He wasn't a Republican. Oh, now I'm out of the camera frame, so I'm getting in trouble for that. All right. Good? So, yeah, that was part of it. And if I wanted to sum it up in one word, I would say that Donald Trump represented hope. People placed their hope in Donald Trump. The second part to that is why. Why did they place their hope in Trump? And I think you nailed half of it, which was that he's not a Republican, he's not a Democrat. He didn't come from the bought and paid for political system, which everybody, Republicans and Democrats, know is broken. So he wasn't part of that. I think he made one particular campaign promise that resonated with people on both sides of the aisle. I'm going to drain the swamp. That resonated with people. That's why Trump generated so much political energy. It's because he represented hope. But here's the problem. That hope is misplaced. Everyone that placed their hope in Donald Trump misplaced that hope. Why, though? Is it because Trump isn't who he said he is, or he wasn't going to do what he said he was going to do? You're getting to it. So, in this government that we have in America, in a constitutional republic, can it be saved by a man? Can we place our hope in Donald Trump to save America? Absolutely not, right? What about a group of men? Okay, we can't place it in one man. What about 51 senators and 218 congressmen and 5 out of 9 justices? No. Why not? They can be bought. Who commissioned this government? What do we have in America? Constitutional republic, right? Who commissioned the government in America? We, the people of these United States, commission you, government, to accomplish this mission within this set of parameters that we give you, right? So who can save America? We, the people, are the only ones that can save America. How is this designed to work? You know, we've got and I think at least 2, maybe 3 different speakers so far have already touched on this. You know what's the biggest obstacle to me as the commander for a constitutional militia? I'm trying to overcome 100 years of indoctrination. 100 years of indoctrination. We like to say that we have public schools. Ultimately, that's a misnomer. We don't have public schools. We have government indoctrination centers. We have a federal Department of Education which deliberately miseducates people and fails to educate people so that they don't know what form of government we have in America, they don't know what the purpose of that government is, and they don't know how it's designed to function. If you poll people on the street and you ask them what form of government do we have in America, what are they going to tell you? Democracy, without exception. I would say 999 out of 1,000, democracy. What is it? Constitutional republic, right? Yeah, good point, good point. What's the purpose of a democracy? Everybody thinks that's what it is, so what's the purpose of a democracy? How does it work? What does it do? Majority rules, yep. So a democracy protects what? Individual liberty of the majority, 51%. What about constitutional republic? How's it different? That's right. It protects the individual liberty of what? The minority, right? Even if that's one person out of 360 million? Well, if we're educated, we should know exactly what the purpose of government in America is, right? Because we have a document that tells us. Does anybody know what that document is? It's not. It's not the Constitution. It's not the Bill of Rights either. It's the Declaration of Independence. Someone was quoting a little portion of it earlier. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted amongst men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That when a government becomes destructive to these ends, the preservation of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, it becomes the right to the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, setting its foundations on such principles as to them would seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. That's the purpose of government in America. The men that built it, that bought it and paid for it in blood, told us what the purpose was, and that is the purpose of government in America. Does government do its job? No, absolutely not, not even close. In fact, what is the greatest threat to your life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness in America? What do you consider to be the greatest threat? Your own government. Ironic, huh? Not a foreign power, not China, not Russia, not terrorism, not the invasion of the southern border. Our own government is the greatest threat to our safety and security. Ironic, isn't it? All right, so we established what form of government we have. We established what the purpose of that government is. How's it supposed to work? How is the system of government that we have designed to function? What is it supposed to do? Well, it's supposed to protect those individual liberties, right? So if the greatest threat to us in America is government, what's supposed to restrain that? What's supposed to check the power of government in America? The people. Okay, so the people are supposed to have power, right? This is the great American experiment in self-governance. We have this concept of the power of the people. We the people of these United States. Well, what does that mean? What does power of the people mean? Voting? Sort of.
Originally, our representative in the branches of the government, protecting the branches of the legislature.
So, okay, I'm tracking where you're going with that.
And then the branches of the government are supposed to check each other, and the states are supposed to check the federal government.
There's truth to that. So what he's saying, and most people who are better educated will immediately cite we have the system of checks and balances. We have three distinct branches of government and the system of checks and balances that exist within that. But that's only partially true. That's only part of the answer. Because that system of checks and balances exists to prevent one branch from becoming disproportionately powerful to the other two branches. So that we don't end up with the executive branch turning into a king. So that the courts don't legislate from the bench. But what prevents the entire system, all three branches, from becoming what we have today, which is a monstrous federal creature that rules us with an iron fist? Second Amendment. Yep, the people. How is that designed to work? Because, you know, going back to our indoctrination thing, you ask most people, even those of us who fall far to the right, what does the Second Amendment say? They can always quote the second half. That's the right of the people to keep and bear arms. Yes. What's the first half? A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. Sticking with our theme of indoctrination, there's a semicolon in the middle of that statement. What does a semicolon mean? Most of us don't have any idea. Semicolon means it's two thoughts, but they're joined. They don't exist apart from each other. Really, the way we should read that semicolon is something more like, as such or because of this. So let's reread it and read the colon out loud, or the semicolon out loud. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. As such or because of this, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. All right, now we're getting to it. Now, what does that look like? Because those who understand the importance of the first half of the Second Amendment, they frequently read that as something more like war or violence is necessary to the security of a free state. The tree of liberty must be refreshed. Is that what it says? It's not. It says well-regulated militia. The existence of the organization is necessary to the security of a free state. Let's go back to our idea of power of the people. What is power? I would say that power is akin to force. And I would argue that there are only two forces or powers on earth, excluding the power of God. There are only two that man has direct access to. One of those is violence. We all know that. We see it acted out all over the world, and we have since the beginning of time. Go all the way back to Cain and Abel. Violence is a real force or a real power. What is the one other thing on earth that can actually restrain or prevent violence or stop it or overcome it? It's threat of force, threat of violence. It's the idea that Teddy Roosevelt captured perfectly when he said, walk softly, carry a big stick. That's the intent of the Second Amendment. The intent of the Second Amendment is that we, the people of these United States, would possess the monopoly on force in America. That's the whole idea. That's what power of the people is that we, the people, would wield the force. We would wield the threat of violence. That way you don't have a commander-in-chief that says, well, you need F-15s and nukes if you're going to take me on. Because we, the people, failed in our responsibility. We delegated authority to government, right? That's what the Constitution is. It's a delegation of authority. We issued a mission to government. This is what you're supposed to be doing. Government failed to do it, so it's our job to do it. Because you can't delegate what? Responsibility. Whose fault is it that government in America is a train wreck? It's my fault. It's my fault because I failed to do my job. I failed to uphold my portion of the bargain and keep my government accountable and maintain the well-regulated militia that was prescribed for me to maintain. I delegated that authority to government and they didn't do the job. And so, oh well, I guess government just rules now. I lost my train of thought for a second there. So this whole idea of power of the people, well, we've established that well-regulated militia is the answer to that. But what does that look like? What does well-regulated militia look like? Is it the National Guard or the Army? We've got an Army, right? It's huge. Is that well-regulated militia? They've got rank and command structure and all that good stuff, right? Well, what's the other half of the Second Amendment? Tell you what, let me back up and tell you a little bit of a story. How many of you guys remember all the way back to Lobby Day of 2020? Gun protest in Richmond. Probably a bunch of y'all were there, I would guess. After that, now, of course, that protest took place because the legislature was threatening gun control ultimately. And the second order effect of that is after you had this huge protest, well, then you had all these cities and counties passing 2A sanctuary resolutions, which ultimately are a cool idea. I appreciate that they're willing to verbally defy Richmond, but what do those resolutions mean? Nothing. Nothing. They're worth the paper they're written on, and that's it. For perspective, there's 133 counties or city municipalities in the state of Virginia. 105 of them passed 2A sanctuary resolutions. Basically, that movement swept across the state like wildfire. While that was taking place, one of the legislators out of Newport News made a statement to the press. He said, if these counties and cities and these sheriff's departments think that they can defy the state, they're wrong. We'll nationalize the National Guard, we'll come and remove their elected officials. Ultimately, they can't really do that. But nevertheless, they made the threat. Why did they make the threat? Well, because government understands that government has to have a monopoly on force. They have to. What does a law mean if government does not have the ability to compel you to obey the law? Is it a law then? Or is it more of a suggestion? It's more of a suggestion, right? They have to have the ability to compel you to obey. But who's the government in America? We, the people of these United States. The great American experiment in self-governance. The monopoly on force resides in the hands of the people. Now, does that mean that every man is a law unto himself? No. Doesn't mean I'm a law unto myself. So what does it mean? The power of the people. That power would reside where? Where the people reside? Where it's closest to and most easily accessed by the people? What does that sound like? Sounds like local government to me. Sounds like the doctrine of the lesser magistrate. which is ultimately what the system of government we have in America, this constitutional republic, was built around. It's built around the doctrine of the lesser magistrate and the idea that power would reside at the lowest level where it's most easily accessed by and most easily influenced by the people. Why is that? Well, there's a couple reasons for that. One is, how much control did we have over the last presidential election? How much did your vote mean? Nothing. Okay, they cheated, right? Yep, they cheated. They stole an election. No doubt about that. Even if they hadn't, with whatever there is, 140, 50, 60 million votes being cast, how much does your vote mean? Tiny, tiny bit, if anything. Tiny, tiny bit. What about local elections? Are we in the city or the county here? County? Any idea what the vote spreads are on county Board of Supervisors elections? If it's a contested election, you got two guys running for the same seat. What's the vote spread? 400 votes? Probably not even that. Probably more like 200. Could the people in this room do the legwork to influence the outcome of a local election? Oh, you did? Okay, so you already proved it. So you can influence your local elections. What about election integrity? Do the people in this room have the ability to plug into their election process and ensure that you have election integrity in Frederick County? You did. You proved that too. Outstanding. So at this level, you have influence and control over your elections. What happens when we elect someone to go to Washington? Now, given you guys are fairly close to Washington, so it may not be as big a problem, but what happens when we elect people and we send them to Washington? Well, they do exactly that. They go to Washington. Yeah, they forget. And where do they buy their gas? Over there. And their groceries. And they probably pay rent over there too. And they're a full-time employee of the federal government. They don't collect a paycheck here. They don't maintain a job here. They probably don't own a business here anymore. They're just an employee of the federal government. They're not your representative. They work for them. Well, what about the guys that would sit up here if this was a boardroom? Part-time job, right? Like, I don't know, whatever, $6,000 a year or something? So what do they still have to have? A job or own a business? Where do they buy their gas? Here. Groceries? Here. Where do they go to church? Here. Interesting. So they're subject to all the same economic factors that we are? They've got skin in the game? Interesting. What happens when they go to the gas station or the grocery store or church or wherever they go? Now I've got to look you in the eye. I've got to answer you man to man, face to face. What happens when I'm on the board and I'm sitting up here? Where are you guys? Right there in the front row, 10 feet away. Making sure I do my job, right? Bingo. Entirely different. When was the last time you saw your senator? Like face to face, had a conversation with him? Oh, right before the election, imagine that. So we don't have any influence over those people, right? But these guys we do. So where does that power belong? Right here, Board of Supervisors. What about this whole idea of the lesser magistrate and power residing at the lowest level? We got what, 360 million people live in America? Ish, something like that. Is it possible for a government to represent 360 million people and represent all of those people well? Pass laws that represent all of them well? I don't think there's any chance. America's a great melting pot, right? The kind of diversity that we have in America, everything from religion to culture to topography to income to, I mean, you name it, we have every kind of diversity you can imagine, and it's huge. So they can't represent all those people well. What about state of Virginia, 8.3 million people? State government represent all of those people well? I would say no. There's way too much difference between Northern Virginia, between Richmond, between rural Southwest Virginia. Too much difference. What about the county? County or city? 50,000 people, something like that. What's the population of this county? Any idea?
100,000.
100,000? Okay, you guys got a bigger county. 100,000 people. Is it possible? We're getting a lot closer, right? We're getting a lot closer. So Yeah, that's the importance of the lesser magistrate. We don't have to have the same laws. It's okay for Frederick County to have one set of laws and Winchester to have a different set, as long as they do not infringe on natural rights. That's why we have a federal government. That's why we have a supremacy clause and a Bill of Rights, is so that Frederick County can't pass laws that deprive you of your right to self-defense. That's why we have those overarching themes. That's why we have the supremacy clause. But the supremacy clause can't exist apart from the 10th Amendment. What's the 10th Amendment say? Any power not specifically delegated to the federal government in this document belongs to who? The states and to the people. So if we have a supremacy clause, we also have to have restraint to that, which is the 10th Amendment. Honestly, if we just enforced the 10th Amendment and we took away all of the power from the federal government that was not delegated to them, we'd be golden. We'd be golden. So going back to our story that we started a few minutes ago before I got sidetracked, you have all these states, all these counties and cities that are passing these 2A sanctuary resolutions. You have this legislator that says, we're going to come and remove your elected officials. How do you respond to that? If the state says, we're going to nationalize the National Guard, we're going to come and remove your elected officials at your local level, your sheriff, your Board of Supervisors, what do? There we go. Well, what do you need if you're going to stop it? You need force of arms, right? At least the threat of it. So Bedford County was the first one to do it. And as far as I'm aware, they are the first public militia muster since before the Civil War. So Bedford County had about 600 people show up to a public park. The sheriff was there. They're adjacent to Campbell County. About 2 weeks later, Campbell County had a public militia muster. We had, 400-ish people show up. About 250 of those signed up to become members of the local constitutional militia. And on our muster cards, we had a little box. You could check if you were interested in leadership. And we ended up with, 20, 25 people, something like that. Is that right, Aaron? 20, 25-ish, something like that? That checked that box. So we called all those people. We ended up sitting around a conference table in a library, looking at each other. And honestly, the conversation started out with, we're a bunch of idiots. What in the world have we done? We are absolutely going to prison for sure. We are on every single list. We're idiots. This was stupid. Maybe we should just go home and pretend like this never happened. And then we thought about the Second Amendment. What I would argue are some of the finest men in the history of the world wrote that this was necessary to the security of a free state. Incidentally, that's the only place in the Constitution or the Bill of Rights that the word necessary appears. These guys placed an awful lot of emphasis on well-regulated militia. Why? When I say the word militia, what do you guys immediately think of? No. Violent extremists, white supremacists, neo-Nazis, rednecks with guns. Wait a minute. Whoa. That escalated quickly. Is that what the founders intended when they wrote necessary to the security of a free state? No, it is not. Certainly is not. The stuff that you see on the news, not what they intended. So what did they intend? Okay, well now we need to know not what the word militia means today in pop culture, but what did it mean in 1770? So we started doing some digging, some research, trying to figure out what did these organizations look like, what made them so important. We came up with 3 characteristics that we believed made those organizations necessary to the security of a free state. One of those we pulled right out of Virginia Code Section 44-1. So Virginia Code Section 44-1 actually defines militia in the state of Virginia. Defines it as having 3 distinct components. One of those is the Virginia Army National Guard, one of those is the Virginia Defense Force, and the third is the unorganized militia, which it further defines as being the whole body of the people, males ages 16 to 55, trained to arms. Okay, that sounds important to me. This is the whole body of the people. It is all of the military-aged males or all of the able-bodied men. If you look at U.S. Title 10, Title 10 actually does the same thing. It defines militia. And I believe, Alex, Title 10 has been updated more recently to remove the word male. So, no, not accurate. Okay, so they included females, but only those that have volunteered to serve, not all of them. But anyway, Title 10 says the same thing, that it's the whole body of the people, all of the military-aged males. And ultimately, that's what the Second Amendment says. If you read the second half of the Second Amendment, it talks about militia in the first half, and the second half is the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Not the right of the military, not the right of law enforcement, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So the idea there being that this is the whole body of the people. And I'm not a fan of Alexander Hamilton because he's a raging Federalist. However, on the topic of militia, his party leaned heavily towards, we don't like the idea of all of the people having guns. This is dangerous, it's a bad idea. And Patrick Henry. Alexander Hamilton, however, fell on the other side of that. And he actually made the statement, he said, what are we afraid of? Are we afraid of the whole body of the people having force of arms, that the whole body of the people would somehow execute tyranny against or oppress the whole body of the people? He says, that's nonsense. How are we going to oppress ourselves? He said, if we fear the whole body of the people being armed, we should also fear hydras and medusas, because mythical monsters are equal threat to us oppressing ourselves. I would say he was exactly right about that. The idea is that the whole body of the people possess force of arms. The second characteristic that we identified is that in the 1770s, every community had an organized militia. Why? Did they all think they needed a private army? I don't think so. What do we have today that they did not have in 1770? Softball. What? Oh, cell phones. Cell phones, okay. How about fire departments? Ambulance corps? Huge law enforcement departments? Yeah. Construction companies, departments of transportation. They didn't have any of that, right? So what happened when a building caught on fire? Called out the able-bodied men. Interesting. What if they wanted to build a new church or a new town hall, a new school? Called out the able-bodied men. What if the bridge into town washed out? Called out the able-bodied men. So these were like a community support organization. A lot more than just gunfighters, huh? They covered down on all of that other stuff that we have filled in because we failed to maintain well-regulated militia. The third and final thing that we came up with that we believe made those organizations what they had to be was the quality of character of the men that led them. Patrick Henry and Thomas Jefferson and George Washington and John Adams and Sam Adams, and that list goes on and on and on. And if you do a deep dive into colonial history, you're going to find some absolutely mind-blowing like forces of nature that were the men that led those organizations and steered those ships in the 1770s. I would argue that there are, in my opinion, there's a finite number of leaders. I think that men are either born leaders or they're not. Men that are not born a leader, they never will be. It doesn't matter what circumstances they're placed in. It doesn't matter what happened to them. They don't have it in them. They will never be a leader. Men that are born leaders then become products of their environment. It affects how they mature and develop as a leader. It affects how much potential they ultimately have as a leader and who they become. I think that those leaders are already identified in our communities. I think that they're the exact same kind of men today that they were in the 1770s. I think they sit on our boards of supervisors. I think that they are local police chiefs or county sheriffs. I think that they are the chiefs of local fire departments. I think that they are pastors of churches and mayors of towns and business owners and merchants and people who are influential in their community, doctors and lawyers. They're the exact same men today that they were then. So what are we looping all the way back around to? Indoctrination. Overcoming 100 years of indoctrination. Because all of those good men in our community that are already leaders, they do not understand the importance of what we were entrusted with. They don't understand how it works. I've been listening all morning, morning, afternoon, whatever it was, to all of the problems that we have in America, which there are a lot of, and they are big problems. And I hear a whole lot of, we need to get the majority in the legislature, and we need to hope that the courts take our side. Ultimately, none of that is going to work. We, the people, must possess force of arms. We have to. Look at our southern border. This is our job It's not government's job to protect me. It's not the sheriff's department's job to protect you. It's their job to show up and clean up the mess. Safety and security is your responsibility. You know, I get really, really frustrated with the American Christian church. The reason that I get so frustrated with the American Christian church is because the American Christian church, in my opinion, is making two monstrous mistakes. One of those is that we don't promote biblical masculinity. And when I say biblical masculinity, I mean men's men. Because you can't find an example in Scripture of a man that the Bible gives us as an example that is not a masculine man's man. You cannot find it. Why? Because part of my responsibility as a biblical man is to protect the weak and the innocent inside my sphere of influence. So I have to be a man's man to do that job. My other issue with the American Christian church is that they constantly promote this idea that we should sit on our hands and pray that God sends some other man to save us. Why would I pray that God sends some other man to save me when God has given me everything that I need to preserve and protect the republic that He entrusted to me? He gave us absolutely everything that we need to do it. Why are we praying that He sends some other man to save us? Maybe we should stop sitting on our hands and start acting like men of action. Because that's what we were commanded to do. My Bible says pray continually. Does yours say that? Yep. You're sitting in church and some wacko with a rifle comes in the back door. Are you going to pray that God sends another man to save you? Or are you going to unholster your weapon and go to work and pray that God Almighty guide your hands? Because that's what you're commanded to do as a biblical man. You're commanded to protect the weak and the innocent within your sphere of influence. You know, we're commanded to be peaceful, right? Correct? That's what my Bible says. What do I have to be in order to be considered peaceful? In order for it to be virtuous for me to be peaceful? I would say that I have to be capable of violence. Let's say, Aaron, stand up for a minute. Let's say I'm picking on Aaron. I'm giving a hard time, I'm poking fun at it, I'm talking junk to him, I'm pushing him around, and he chooses not to do anything. He chooses not to beat me up, not to leave me in the gutter. Then what? We say, wow, that's virtuous of him. What a great guy for not beating up that little punk. Well, what if the roles are reversed? What if it's the other way around? What if Aaron is picking on me, pushing me around, giving me a hard time, and I decide to go the other way? You need to stand up to the bully. You need to be courageous, even though you know he's going to beat you up. You need to stand up to him. Why? Because it's not virtuous to be weak and cowardly. It's virtuous to be capable of violence, but restrained and controlled, to have chosen to be peaceful. Not that you have no other option, because you're so weak and pathetic that you can't stand up. That's not what biblical men should look like.
The biblical definition of being meek.
Power under control?
Power under control.
Bingo. Yes, that's exactly. That word gets misinterpreted. You frequently hear people say, oh yeah, Christian men should be meek. Yes, they should be powerful but under control, restrained, sober-minded and self-controlled. So anyway, that is a considerable frustration of mine. You know, they sanitize the Bible and turn it into something that it's not in an effort to prevent Christian men from being what they should be. If half of the men who claim to be Christian were half of the men that they should be in America, we would never be in the position that we're in. But the American Christian church promotes something contrary to what the Bible says for the express purpose of keeping us suppressed. Because if Christian men acted like they should, they would not be able to be ruled by this government. So we've got a government that for I don't even know how many years promoted and spent our money to barbarically murder those who are truly innocent. Amen. Correct? And how many of us continue to support that government with our money? All of us, right? We all kept paying taxes. Somewhere along the way, we're going to have to stop praying for him to save us and start being men of action. Start doing something to preserve and protect the republic that he gave to us. How many of you ever heard the phrase that we're to be good stewards of that which we're entrusted with? We've all heard it, right? What do we do with that usually? Money, right? Be a good steward of the money. Children, should be a good steward of the children that he entrusted to us. What about our republic? I would argue that he entrusted me with the finest republic that has ever existed in the history of the world. One that he built. And he entrusted it to me. I heard a seminar a number of years ago, and I can't remember the name of the guy that teaches it, but he was talking about Lexington and Concord. And he's a historian, so he actually knows, it was a detailed historical account of what actually happened on that day. And he was talking about as the British column was retrograding back to Boston, and they're being harassed or bird-dogged by the colonial militia. And there's one spot where the column encounters a bridge, and the bridge is super narrow, so the whole thing kind of bottlenecks and gets slowed down. And there's one company of militiamen that's in the road that is marching behind the British column, basically just kind of escorting them back. And then there's militia in the wood line on both sides that are just kind of harassing. Now, they're harassing them but not firing on them. Why? What was the order of the day? What was the order that Major John Parker had issued at Punkatasset Hill? Yep. Stand your ground, do not fire unless fired upon, but if they mean to have a war, let it be here and today. So that's the order that they were operating under. Now, in order to appreciate this story, there's two things that you need to understand about colonial/colonial military culture. One of those is violation of the order of a militia officer was a crime. You faced a firing squad or a noose if you violated the order that was given you. The other thing is, these men didn't know each other. We don't travel the way we travel today. I wouldn't come from South Central Virginia to Winchester for the afternoon in the 1770s. These men didn't know each other. Commanders, probably. Men in the ranks, no chance. This column comes to a stop, and the militia company in the road is still marching. They're still closing the distance. And one of the militia officers is watching what's transpiring from the wood line. And the officer in charge of the British rear guard is a young officer, and he decides, no, wait a minute, I'm not just going to let these militia guys walk up on me. I'm going to give them a volley and back them off. So he forms a firing line in the road, give that company a volley. The commander in the wood line is watching what's transpiring and goes, wait a minute, in order for me to adhere to the order that is given me, I'm going to have to watch them take a volley at point blank. They're going to get slaughtered in the road. And he goes, wait a minute. I may not know those men, but I can't watch this happen. I get that it's my neck. Make ready and fire. So they do. And of course, as soon as his men open fire, so do the men on the other side of the street and the company in the road. They cut down that rearguard detachment in the road. There were no colonists or Americans that were killed at that place, at that bridge. The guy teaching the seminar says, he says, you know, you hear all the time talking about Lexington Green. You have that lone shot rings out. No one knows where it came from. That's the shot heard around the world. That's the moment America was born. He says, I disagree. He said, that was an accident. That's not the moment America was born. He said, this is the moment America was born. The moment that a man decided that he didn't care, that he was going to risk his life for men that he didn't even know, that he would lay down his life and purchase in blood someone else's liberty. He said, that's what makes America America. He said, this is the moment that America was born. I'm inclined to agree with that assessment. I would take it 2 steps farther. He further expounded on that. He said, what other nation in the history of the world has sent their young men by the hundreds of thousands to die on someone else's dirt for someone else's liberty? Not to conquer or to build an empire, but to pay for someone else's liberty. No other nation in the history of the world. I had a very unique opportunity. I worked for the Virginia Army National Guard. I had an opportunity to participate in a bunch of competitions as a non-commissioned officer this year. and did very, very well with that. I went all the way to the national competition in Alaska, and I placed number 3 in the nation. As a thank you for that, the Guards sent me to Normandy for D-Day 79. The appreciation that the French people that live in Normandy have for what Americans did on the beaches is absolutely unreal. You want to talk about a humbling experience? I didn't get it. When we first arrived there, the first couple of ceremonies that we did, you know, there's ceremonies in every little town and hamlet you can imagine. My unit ended up doing like 27 of them in 10 days. And it's like the ceremony itself was exactly what you'd expect. It was rather somber. But the moment the ceremony was over, it was like a switch was flipped. And we immediately turned into a festive atmosphere. And they wanted us to come back to the town hall. They had open tap. They had DJ and smoke machines and lights and the whole 9 yards. And I'm going, what in the world is going on here? They just assume that this is what Americans do? Well, after about 3 of those, and of course, it's kind of funny because they sit us every other one. So it's soldier, Frenchman, whatever, at all these long tables. Well, they don't speak a lick of English. I don't speak a lick of French. So we just do this. And they do that back. It's like, okay, cool, great, here we are. And we eat our food. Well, like the third one, I ended up sitting across from a gentleman that's from the States. And he's lived in France for like 12 years or something. So his English was awesome. And so I asked him, I was like, dude, I don't get this. Like, I don't understand. What's this like festive atmosphere all about? What is the deal? And he said, look, he said, this is what you need to understand. He said, you're American. So we have 4 July 1776. He said, in Normandy, they have 6 June 1944. He said, they are grateful to you because American soldiers bought and paid for the liberty that they have in blood. This nation was ruled by another. The most evil regime of our time conquered and ruled France for years prior to the invasion of Normandy. These people are free because Americans paid for it. Okay, got it. That changes the perspective entirely. We as Americans have somewhere between very little and no appreciation for what we have been entrusted with. We have literally been entrusted with the finest republic. God built the finest republic in the history of the world, and he entrusted it to you and me. He entrusted it to us to preserve and protect and give to our children and grandchildren, and we're doing a shit job of it. There is an she's not here. There is a quote, and I don't feel like taking my phone. Oh, there she is. There is a quote from Sam Adams that talks about, it talks about what we have been entrusted with, and that if we're not careful, that, you know, the liberty that we have that was purchased at the expense of, oh boy, she'll pull it up in a second here and I'll read it to you. But the gist of it was that if we're not careful, that we will allow this liberty to be wrestled from us by violence, or that we will be cheated out of it by the artifices of designing men. And that's what we're allowing to happen. We're allowing ourselves to be cheated out of the liberty that was entrusted to us by the artifices of designing men, because we have been miseducated and we don't understand what we have been entrusted with or how that works. I would take what that gentleman said about America being different 2 steps farther. Yes, we have sent our young men to die on other people's soil and purchased other people's liberty. What else have we done that nowhere else in the world does? What happens anytime there is a natural or humanitarian disaster anywhere in the world? Americans. Bingo. This guy's going like this. Yeah, the aid pours out of America by the billions of dollars, everything you can imagine. Food and medicine and blankets and building materials and security forces and you name it. We ship it anywhere in the world for any natural or humanitarian disaster at the drop of a hat. No other nation in the world does that. And I would take it 1 step farther. What other nation in the history of the world has taken the Great Commission the way that America has? What other nation in the history of the world has sent missionaries by the thousands literally to the ends of the earth? None. God has used America in a way that he has never used any other nation in the history of the world. He has done more to preserve and protect the safety of people around the world, more to further his kingdom than he has done with any other nation in the history of the world. And he placed that in our hands. He gave it to you and me to protect and preserve. And we're doing a terrible job. I absolutely firmly believe that the only way to preserve and protect this republic, to prevent the artifices of designing men from cheating us, or to be wrestled from us by violence, is to put real force of arms in the hands of people, which means at the local level. You know, the founders built this and framed it perfectly. They tested and proved this system. I hear theories all the time about what we should do. The men that bought this and paid for it, they already figured it out. They did it. They proved it. And then they entrusted it to us and told us, hey, well-regulated militia, that's necessary to the security of a free state. It's very, very important. You guys should maintain that. And guess what we didn't do? We lost the keys to the castle. Because they gave them to us. We lost those keys. It's about time we took the keys back. Because we're allowing them to drive wherever the heck they want and do whatever they want. You know, ultimately, militia is something that we kind of delegated to government. We told them, like, hey, this is part of your job, government. You should be maintaining this organization, making sure that it is provided for with money. What? Yes, sir.
When did that happen historically?
1902? 1903. National Defense Authorization Act. It was after the Spanish-American War. What they figured out, and I'll tell you the reason that they gave us for the 1903 National Defense Authorization Act. A lot of people refer to it as the Dick Act because that's the name of the guy that authored the bill or whatever. The reason that they gave us for it is when they called up militia, which at the time the standing army was very, very small. It was like 14,000 or something like that. Yeah, if that. So they relied on militia anytime we wanted to go to war. And so they called up the militia, and some states sent really, really squared away militias that were very large and very well equipped and very well trained, and other ones sent ones that kind of half-assed it. And so the federal government went, oh, we can't have this. We need to have standardization across the board. And so then they said, okay, you guys need to adhere to this standard. And the states went, well, you're not paying for this. Well, you can't make us buy all this stuff. We don't have the money for all that stuff. So then the federal government goes, okay, well, fine. Well, we'll pay for that, and you're going to adhere to our standards. So the idea was to provide some uniformity and make the fighting force more efficient. But ultimately, here's what happened. The truth of the matter is that the federal government takes all this tax money, and then they decide whether or not that tax money can come back to you. So if you want your National Guard, your state's defense force to be funded, you better play by the federal government's rules. State of Virginia, for instance, I was just at Capitol Hill with the National Guard, what was that, last week, 2 weeks ago, something like that. For every $1 that the state of Virginia spends on the National Guard, the federal government spends 27. 98% of the Virginia National Guard's funding comes from the federal government. So what happens when the state of Virginia wants to say something like, oh, no, we're not interested in doing that vaccine thing. Oh, we're going to pull your federal funding. Now all of a sudden you don't have money for uniforms, guns, training, fuel, anything. So that's how they control the states, is through the flow of money. Huge mistake on our part. We should have foreseen that for what it was when that act was originally introduced, but apparently we did not. But ultimately, U.S. Title X, constitutions for 47 different states have enshrined what unorganized militia looks like, and that it's the whole body of the people. And we did delegate that authority to government. But what happens when you delegate authority to someone and they don't do the job? Because ultimately, it's my responsibility. If I delegate authority to you, sir, you're my project manager, I'm the business owner, and this lovely young lady wants a house built. And she and I talk about budget and blueprints and all that good stuff, and then I turn around and I hand all that to you. And I say, here's the checkbook and the trucks and the employees and everything, go build this house. And you don't do it. Who's she coming to? Me. I don't get to blame you. It's not your fault. It's my fault. Exact same thing is true with government. I don't get to blame government for its own condition. It's my fault. Responsibility is mine. I can't delegate that. The exact same thing is true with militia. Responsibility for the maintenance of militia is mine. I could delegate the authority to government. You know, we have a historical precedent for that. When we delegate authority, but government doesn't do the job, it's written down in a document. It's my favorite document. Declaration, right? So the Declaration of Independence is a list of, I think it's 21 complaints. How many? I think it's 21 different complaints that we had against Parliament and the British Crown. One of those is that the King and Parliament have repeatedly dissolved our representative houses and failed to establish another. Legislative powers, being incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise. Is the right to inherent self-defense, is it capable of being annihilated? Can they take that from us? I would say absolutely not. That's a God-given right. They don't have the authority to take it from it. So it's incapable of annihilation. So if I delegate it to them and they don't do it, whose job is it? It's mine. Where is the maintenance of unorganized militia? Who's doing that job? Do we have one in this locality? No. So whose job is it to make sure that it's maintained? Going back to this whole concept of threat of force or threat of violence, we touched on it a little bit when we were talking about choosing to be peaceful and peace being a virtue, but only if you're capable of violence. Aaron, can you stand back up again? If I'm a mugger or I'm a thug and I see that dude walking down the street in a militia ball cap and a grunt-style t-shirt, am I going to pick on him? Probably not. Probably not. Why not? Because he's carrying a passive threat of force or threat of violence with him as he goes, right? All right, thanks, Aaron. Alex, can you stand up for a minute? What about her? Maybe pick on her? Short, cute, blonde-haired girl? More likely. Yeah, she certainly is. Maybe your attention to detail wasn't that good. A lot more likely, right? Because she doesn't carry the same passive threat of violence with her that Aaron does. What about law enforcement? Thank you, Alex. What about law enforcement? If I have on a uniform with a badge and a gun, passive threat of violence, right? Goes with me everywhere I go. Let's say we all get together. What are we in? Bingo hall here, right? We all get together for bingo every whatever night it is, Tuesday night. I come every night, every Tuesday. Everybody knows that I'm a cop, but I always come in, whatever, jeans and a t-shirt. What happens if I walk through the door in uniform? Hits different, doesn't it? Everybody's like, oh, no, wait a minute, officer, I promise I paid my speeding ticket. Why? Why do they say that? Yeah, it's a joke, sure. But they understand there's a passive threat of violence there, right? What about militia? Does militia carry a passive threat of violence? It does. So I'm heavily networked in the political arena. And U.S. Congressman Bob Good frequently introduces me to other politicians. I had the opportunity to get introduced to Ron DeSantis. And Bob introduces me, says, Ron, I got a young man here I'd really like you to meet. I got a great deal of respect for him. This is Dan Abbott. He's the commander of the Campbell County Militia. Now, as he is saying that, Ron is reaching out to shake my hand. What does Ron do when the word militia comes out of Bob's mouth? He still shakes my hand, but his eyes get about this big, and he goes, why? Because that word still means something, right? We understand in our culture. Now, yes, it's been demonized a bit. Some people earned a bad reputation for it, and the left capitalized on that and tried to make it into something that it's not. Why is the left trying to do that, though? Because they know it still means something. Because they're terrified of the idea of we the people possessing real power. They're terrified of the idea that, you know, it's one thing for us to have guns, right? That's one thing. It's something entirely different for us to operate as a unit and speak with one voice and stand in formation. That hits entirely differently. Hits entirely differently. You know, continuing to talk about that idea of the threat of violence that the Second Amendment brings to the table. How many of you remember or have seen, there was a series of interviews that was done with Admiral Yamamoto after the Second World War. He was an admiral from Imperial Japan. And one of the questions that they asked him in that series of interviews was, after Pearl Harbor, you had destroyed America's ability to make war in the Pacific. Why didn't you invade the mainland? They wouldn't have been able to stop you. Does anybody remember what he said? Yes. He said, do you think we're stupid? We'd never invade America. There would be a gun behind every blade of grass. Foreign powers understand the threat of violence that the American people are supposed to have. They get it. We are the ones who have forgotten. The liberal Democrats still understand. That's why they try so hard to demonize the word militia and prevent Americans from taking care of their constitutional responsibility, doing their job as Americans, and putting force of arms in the hands of people. That's what we're supposed to be doing as Americans. That's our job. How in the world am I going to protect the weak and the innocent? Am I over time? Not yet. Oh, somebody doesn't like what I have to say. Any questions? I am getting close to running out of time. Any questions? Sir? Yep. Alex and Aaron both have business cards. Alex has business cards she will give to you, Aaron. Aaron is the executive officer for Campbell County Militia. I'm the commander. Alex is my girlfriend and my secretary for the militia. And they will happily answer any of your questions. I will happily answer any of your questions. I will give you my personal cell phone, my email, anything you guys want. Sir?
So I was going to ask you that when the incident happened, the riots were going on. I think it was someplace in Kansas City. A company came outside bearing a presence of a threat. And yet the government came after them. The sheriff should have stuck up to them, but they were taken to court. And I think they were, if I remember correctly, were they guarded? They lost. We lost. So we're sort of coming up against
Yes.
the right to bear arms to protect ourselves with a threat of defense, but we're really not, according to the government.
Okay. You're correct. And why does that dynamic play out the way it plays out? If you guys could not hear him, he was asking about the couple out of, I believe it was Kansas City during the riots, that came out on their porch with a pistol and an AR. And of course the government came after them. Why does that play out like that? Because government has a monopoly on force. Would that play out differently in a locality that had a robust constitutional militia? Yeah, it would. It would play out entirely differently. That's right. It played out differently in our community because we already had a well-regulated militia. We ended up with a riot downtown. They tried to burn a restaurant over something that they claimed was racist, which was not, completely beside the point. And there ended up being 20-some guys that were, most of whom were militia members, although it was not an official militia function that ended up in that restaurant. And 200 to 300 rioters broke every window out of the building and threatened to burn it for hours. Law enforcement showed up with 6 officers, and basically the mob just beat the tar out of 6 officers and ran them off. They burned 4 cruisers, I believe, to the ground, just absolutely torched to nothing. Fortunately, the lock boxes that house the weapons in those cruisers are apparently pretty durable, and they couldn't get into those. One of them they shot full of holes. 2 of them they shot full of holes. And ultimately what happened to disperse that was the county militia showed up with 60 packs and marched in a staggered column with body armor and rifles down the street. 2020. Probably June. No, certainly not. They don't want you to know that. Marched in a staggered column down the road. Where does the mob go? Elsewhere. Yes, sir, ma'am, whoever.
About the cowboys. Now we know the basics. A lot of the cowboys have been arrested, they're in jail. Were they not organized or well-organized?
So so basically every state in the Union has some kind of law against paramilitary activities. Alex, is that correct? Every state in the Union?
34 states have laws either in their state constitution or in their state laws that say they can have unorganized militia. 3 additional states have a defense force only, and the remaining 3 have not. All of them each have laws against paramilitary activity. The difference between a organized legal militia and paramilitary activity is that paramilitary activity is mobs and riots and shutting down highways and all of the crap that Black Lives Matter or Proud Boys or eco-terrorists or whatever do. That's paramilitary.
Yes, by definition, the Proud Boys would be a paramilitary. Honestly, part of that is just because they don't carry the word militia and they don't have any relationship with government. They are just their own separate entity. They don't have any ties to government. They don't carry the word militia because militia is constitutionally protected. It's constitutionally protected in the states. It's constitutionally protected via the Second Amendment. It's constitutionally protected, or not constitutionally, but it is legally protected via U.S. Title X. So, I tell people all the time, because people ask me that regularly, like, oh, what about the paramilitary clause? Are you guys able to train? Yes, because we're not a paramilitary organization. This is a military organization. This is force of arms in the hands of local government. That's what it's supposed to be. Now, does that mean that you need or are required to have permission from local government? Certainly not. Certainly not. The American people don't ask permission of government. We ultimately misrepresent. So we have this idea of representatives. We have elected representatives, right? That go wherever and represent us. Really, what we should be looking for. How many of you guys have seen the movie Troy? Movie Troy? Right at the beginning of that movie, there is a scene where you've got these 2 armies that are opposing each other, and they decide that this is not going to be decided by the armies going head to head. They're going to have a champion from each army fight, and whoever wins is the winner. So what does the king do? He turns around and he looks at his army and he goes, who is the baddest among us? Who is the most courageous, the most lethal, the baddest soldier in my army? That's the guy that I want to represent me. That's what we should be doing when we pick an elected representative. We should be picking a champion. What I'm doing is I'm deciding who is going to Richmond or who is going to Washington in my absence to fight on my behalf. And what we should be looking for is the baddest among us. Who can go to Richmond and just rip the doors off the hinges and go to town? That's who we want to go as our representative. Should be a champion, not just some dude that can, be there to vote. And the other thing that we seem to fail to understand is that when we send, all right, let's say that I'm running for political office. Let's say I'm running for U.S. Senate, and I can't be everywhere all at the same time, right? So what do? I appoint these people that will go to county Republican committee meetings and stuff like that and speak on my behalf. Right? It's not me, it's somebody else I have chosen as a representative. So let's say that I picked Alex as my representative to come speak to y'all. Well, what happens when I show up here? Is Alex going to talk? Or am I going to talk? I'm going to talk, right? Same thing should happen with government. I elect someone to go on my behalf when I'm not there, because I can't give up all the days of work to go down to Richmond and take care of business. But what happens when I show up? My representative ought to sit down and shut up, because the boss is in the house, he's talking now. And what do? We beg our representative to hear us. Please listen to me. That's not how this is designed to work. But again, we have been deliberately miseducated, so we don't understand how this works, so that we can be ruled. Sir?
Get back to an earlier issue here on authorizing the militia. You said the militia is a military organization. and doesn't need the blessing of the Board of Supervisors, where does the authority actually, is it you authorize yourselves? Is that what we're talking about?
Well, yeah, I would go right back to what Alexander Hamilton was touching on, which is the whole body of the people are not going to execute violence against or oppress themselves, nor do they need permission from government. Now, in Campbell County and in Bedford County next door, we're actually formally recognized by a resolution from our Board of Supervisors that makes us a county asset. Now, how I would approach that is the exact same way, if I'm going to talk to a girl's dad about marrying her, am I asking for his permission or his blessing? That's right, you're asking for his blessing. You're not asking for his permission. He doesn't own her. She's not his property. If he says no, am I just going to go, oh, well, sorry, your dad said no, forget it? No. You're probably going to elope. So militia does the same thing. Militia will elope. You're giving government the opportunity to be involved, to have a voice in it, to have a seat at the table. Like, hey, this is your responsibility, government. You need to be involved in this. Mr. Board of Supervisors, Mr. Sheriff, looks like I'm over time. You give them an opportunity to participate and be involved, and they should be involved and participate. But if they don't, you're going to move ahead anyways. Because we're Americans, we're not asking government for their permission. We're giving them our permission to do certain things. So, now I've got 5 minutes? Okay. Okay. I got 5 more minutes. Any other questions? All right. So what we're looking to do is what I'm looking to do is have you guys hold a public militia muster in Frederick County. That's what we did in Campbell County. That's what we did in Bedford County. A number of other counties have done it. I want to see you guys have a public militia muster. Invite everyone in your community. Invite your local politicians. Have a public militia muster. Get with your Board of Supervisors. Get with your sheriff. Talk to them about standing up a constitutional militia. Now, we've done it in Campbell County. We have done all of the legwork on all of the documentation. We have codes of conduct, we have bylaws, all of that stuff that governs how the organization operates. I'm elected, Aaron is elected, our other officers are all elected, our first sergeant's elected. From the body of the people. We have an absolutely bulletproof relationship with our Board of Supervisors. I think there are 5 of 7 board members who are also members of the county militia. We have a relationship that is like this, not only with our sheriff, but with the sheriffs in the neighboring localities. Not to mention all of the elected officials. I go down to Richmond, and I kid you not, I am a celebrity in Richmond because there are so many legislators in the House of Delegates and in the Virginia State Senate that know me and are on a first-name basis because I am the commander of the militia. That's all I am. I'm a nobody in my community apart from that. And every time I see them, come running right up to me, shake my hand. Oh, it's great to see you. How's everything going? How's the militia doing? Whatever. You guys still growing, still at? No. Oh, yeah, absolutely. People understand the hope that this provides. They understand that this is the only way to put real power back in the hands of people. So let's have a public muster here. Yes, sir. I would love to. I absolutely believe wholeheartedly every word that I said to you guys today. I believe that we have been entrusted with the finest republic in the history of the world, and I believe that I have been delinquent in my responsibility to maintain this organization. I believe that it is absolutely the only hope of saving America, of putting real power back in the hands of people, and I am wholly committed to that end. I will drive anywhere, anytime. I will give up every bit of my free time to ensure that that is able to happen. Sir?
What do you suggest our first step in muster?
And so the very first step, which is a very short step, is a muster committee, which might be the people in this room sitting down and going, what is the best venue? What is the best date to have a public militia muster? And then flyers. That was what we had the most success with paper flyers. If you remember 2020, that was like the Facebook and social media purge of everything conservative. So we weren't able to use social media at all. They took it down faster than we could put it up. But we put up flyers. It was like every other phone pole in the county, every post office, every gas station, every bulletin board, the library. I mean, there were flyers everywhere. So anyway, I would have a muster committee that picks a time and picks a location, and then I would start having conversations with your local officials. Hey, this is what we're doing. We're giving you an opportunity to participate in this. We would love to have you involved. Sir.
Did I hear you say there's an age limit?
Good question. So what I did is I quoted to you Virginia Code Section 44-1, which says the whole body of the people, males ages 16 to 55, trained to arms. A lot of people go, oh, I'm over that, or oh, I'm a female, I can't participate. What that is a requirement. In the event, let's say that the governor activated the unorganized militia across the state because we faced a foreign invasion or a widespread natural disaster or something like that. If you are a male 16 to 55, you are required to report. That's just like a draft. So what they're saying is, if we initiate a draft and you fit these parameters, you have to show up. And then the National Guard would sift through and figure out who's actually able-bodied and whatever. But that doesn't mean those outside those parameters are excluded from participating. It's just that they're not required by law to participate.
He's fantastic, okay? Just what he's saying, though, guys, is that most of us aren't 16 to 55. Okay, I passed that a while back, all right? But that doesn't mean that we can't organize like we did today. Dan and I have been talking about this for months, okay? How we can put something together so people understand what it is, okay? How we can work together. Mountain Patriots gets together and we do stuff like he was saying, somebody needs a house done, we do this. Don't go where, don't go where, all right? But somebody's house burns down, we all go there. Somebody's a spouse dies, we help out. We pick up food, we go help them. Somebody needs wood, we go do it. We're already doing that. I can do that at 61, 62 years old. 62 years old, holy cow. All right, but that's what we do. And that's about 95% of it, am I correct? Yeah. Is doing what we're doing right now, public service. This is a public service. Okay, this is a public service. This is making people aware of what's going on. So we're just not 16 to 55 years old. But that means that all of the people in here can have a spot, whether it be something communication-wise, whether it's getting flyers out, whether it's helping with the election, whether it's helping with the polls, whether it's helping with a house, whether it's delivering food. We can all do something in this community. That's what this is all about. That's what this is all about. Dan, do you have anything left you want to say? We want to try to do this, guys. Probably the beginning of March.
So I'll get you in just a second. What I want to do is I want to be able to network with you guys. So I'm going to put one of your brochures up here that has all these sweet lines in the middle of it, probably for taking notes, which I didn't use. But I'm going to use this as a sign-up sheet. So if you guys will come up here and give me a name and a phone number, I will get in contact with you. I also put my name and contact information, so if you guys want to reach out to me directly, you can. But I will create some form of group somehow, whether it's on Signal or email or whatever. We will get you into a group which can serve as a muster committee, and we can talk about this stuff. I will give you all of the documentation that I have from Campbell County, our codes of conduct, our bylaws, the resolutions that our county government's passed, all of that stuff I will happily give to you guys. You can chew it apart, change it, do whatever you want with it, muster flyers, muster cards. I will give you everything that we have done. I just have to have a way to be able to get in touch with you guys and for you to get in touch with me. And sir, you had a question.
Yes, I'm in the names. Do you understand the heritage of your name, Dan Abbott?
I do not, but I would love to have a conversation with you offline. Send it.
Judge, and Abbott is from a priesthood line, and I sense that on your calling to your life.
Boom!
I'll take it. Sir.
Do you have any suggestions on how we can get that age group interested in what you're saying?
Muster.
Because it's easy for us, because we're a little older and a little more.
So I'll try to answer that as quickly as I can. So that has been a major problem for a long time, is that sort of younger generation. I am noticing a shift in that younger generation. And where I'm noticing, or how I'm noticing it, is the popularity of guys like Jocko and some of those YouTube personalities, and the Tate brothers, and that psychologist who I can't remember the name of, older guy, that are pushing this. Jordan Peterson, yes. Yeah, whoever that was, Jordan Peterson. I'm noticing a shift as young men are gravitating towards that. And to me, that's a good sign. I think that pendulum swung so far and so heavy in the direction of this weak, effeminate, woke, whatever it is, and now young men are going, wait a minute, what the heck is going on here? This isn't right. And so that pendulum is starting to swing back. I think we need to capitalize on that swing as it comes towards centric. It should not swing as far. Ultimately, that whole idea of toxic masculinity is kind of a misnomer. Like, those words don't belong together. Like, you can't join those words. They're two separate things. It's not. Toxic masculinity is not a thing. You have toxic people. It doesn't matter whether they're masculine or feminine. And then you have masculinity. That's a whole separate thing. But I see that pendulum swinging back towards the middle, and I think we can capitalize on giving young men who want to be men's men, who want to be biblical masculine men, a place that they can get that from.
Church youth groups.
Can you just quickly, what do people expect at a muster? What happens?
All right, so the question was, what can people expect at a muster? So the way that we did a muster is we had a couple of speakers lined up to speak. One of them was a local Board of Supervisors member, and they actually got the jump on it. They actually had a resolution created to propose to the board, and he was the gentleman that sponsored that resolution to the Board of Supervisors, like ultimately a few weeks later. But he spoke, and we had a couple other, Patriots. I was not one of them. I actually just came to the first muster. I wasn't part of the muster committee. And Aaron, I think you're the same boat, right? You came to the muster but weren't part of the committee?
I was right after, because I heard you all had a muster because I didn't see the flyers. Maybe
Okay.
we don't post them up on enough telephone poles.
Yeah, he doesn't see well. They were fluorescent and everything. Whatever. So, yeah, we had a number of speakers lined up, and honestly what took them, and we did have people like form up so that we could get like a count. We had a couple of facilitators who are going like, yeah, here, let's get like a 10-man front here, we'll go 10 deep, then we'll start another column over here. Kind of had people form up. In the case of Campbell County, guys did bring their privately owned firearms with them, which if you have a venue that can facilitate that, that's okay. I'm not a huge fan of that. I just don't really see a purpose to it. The idea of parading around in full kit with rifles and whatever is like a show of force, in my opinion, is kind of stupid. What it ends up looking like is some kind of a costume party. It ends up having the exact opposite effect of what you intended it to have. Now, obviously, we do a lot of training in full kit and body armor. We do PT in body armor. We shoot all the time, because that's our responsibility is men, particularly men in the militia, is to be trained to arms so that we stand a chance of doing our job, which the Constitution tells us what the role of the militia is. So let's see here. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15. The militia shall be called forth to execute the laws of the Union, repel foreign invasion, and suppress domestic insurrection. So that's the purpose of the organization. Execute the laws of the Union. The supreme law of the land is the United States Constitution. Supremacy Clause establishes that Supreme Court has ruled it on 9 separate decisions. That is the supreme law of the land. So who is the constitutional enforcement agency? It's well-regulated militia. That's what it is. It's the only 3-letter agency that I care about. It's Constitutional Enforcement Agency, well-regulated militia. I think I'm way over time now, so, sir. Well, that's a good question. There are 2 of them that are formally recognized by boards of supervisors. There's probably another dozen that exist, but they don't have the same size or the same recognition that Campbell and Bedford County have. I really firmly believe that it is of the utmost importance that it be married to local government, whether government likes it or not. Keep hounding your representatives, keep hounding your sheriff, build a relationship with them. These local representatives and local sheriffs, they would have a lot stiffer spines if they knew that they had real backing. If the dynamic was not that The sheriff has to stand in front of me. Don't come here, Richmond. I'm going to protect these people from you. That's not the way it's supposed to work. It should be the other way around. What should be happening is I should be standing in front of the sheriff with 500 gunfighters. Incidentally, that's about what my roster is for Campbell County, is almost 500. I should be standing in front of the sheriff saying, if you think you're going to get our sheriff, you're going to have to come through the people. That changes the way that works entirely. And ultimately, it shouldn't just be me standing out there. It should be my Board of Supervisors and my county sheriff and my Commonwealth attorney all linked arm in arm, providing a bulletproof bulwark that says, let's go, government overreach. You won't come into our jurisdiction. That's what's supposed to happen. Real power is supposed to be in the hands of local government. And you would find that the spines of local government, sheriffs, and boards of supervisors would be a whole lot stiffer if they realized that they had real backing. If it wasn't them just hanging out there flapping in the breeze, repelling the government by themselves. It would hit different.
Excellent.
Say one quick point to add to your thing. Sheriff comes from Shire Reeve, which means the Shire, and Shire, and then the protector of the local people.
That's the etymology of it.
Ta-da.
One quick comment for all the ladies in the room. We have been talking a lot about masculinity and the role of men and all of that. How many of you in here are mothers? Nobody protects your kids like you do, right? Just because the men need to know how to fight doesn't mean that we don't have a place in this as well. All right? Who's responsible for defending the home if the man's away? So, yes, the militia, we talk a lot about men and the leadership of men and all of that, and I wholeheartedly believe in that. But there is a place for women, children, teens, all of it. I mean, my 7-year-old is here. So please, if you're interested, the sign-up sheet's being passed around, and we typically use the Signal app because we can add and remove people easier than group messages, like text message apps. So you will be hearing from us if you put your name and number on that sheet.
We want to thank Alex, and we want to thank our buddy here, Dan Abbott, for coming up here today. Thank you. We're going to do you proud, brother. Oh my gosh. Did you all get a lot out of this today? I'm sorry, you know what? This is not fake news. This is not fake news. And I'm sure that myself and a few of the Mountain Patriots will be sitting down, correct, Charlie? We'll be sitting down and we'll be talking about this. No, I am not doing this myself, but I will help facilitate the muster and help you out. I know, Growth, there's a lot of us that are interested in trying to jump in the middle of this and help out. So we want to thank Dan for coming up here, and Aaron and Alex from Campbell County. We've been in touch with them. We've been talking a lot about this for quite a few months before we actually did this.